I'm Jocelyn Reed, your host, mother, sister, friend, educator, coach, and lifelong learner. A super fan of a mac and cheese loving curious kiddo named Zaire. Let's plant seeds for the future and figure out how to describe and share this wild ride we call life together, one word at a time.
You are listening to Rootwords, the podcast presented by Revolve Learning.
Welcome back to another Educator's Edition episode. We are focusing on the word generous. And don't forget, we already did legacy last time. We always have a questions to connections worksheet that is just for you. So you can start to think about how you can approach some of these concepts with your students in order to build relationships. I was perusing social media one day and I came across this story about a student who wrote at the bottom of their assessment that they would like their bonus points donated to the student who scored the lowest on the exam. This really got me thinking, who is this kid? And more importantly, who raised them? So this example is so far from the mindset that I had growing up as a student. I had to start considering what other factors were involved with this student displaying such a spirit of generosity without being prompted to do so. I know for a fact that I would have never given up bonus points. I would not have cared if the quarter was ending tomorrow and I had 150 points out of 100 and there was not another assignment being given. I 100% had a scarcity mindset growing up. So instead of thinking about how I can give and be generous, I would have just been that student that overachieved by that many points, which makes this student extra special. If I think about this story in the context of that quote I shared on the other episode, we say generosity is the most natural outward expression of an inner attitude of compassion and loving kindness. I got that from the Dalai Lama XIV. What we need to realize is that someone in that student's life planted that seed of character and generosity, which provided that student with an opportunity that was done pretty discreetly. Sometimes, like I said in the other episode, it's hard to give, especially as a teacher. It doesn't feel like nothing because we have family, we have friends, and we show up to school to give our all to our classroom and our students. But then we're asked to give so much more if we really want to take our practice to the next level. And what I'm talking about here is how do we sort of shift the culture of school environments and teacher environments to where we actually promote more sharing among colleagues, to where we feel like we don't have to hoard all of the nuggets and gems that we've learned over the years. We can actually share freely among our peers as educators. I was lucky and early in my career to be a part of circles of educators that gave freely. They would let me in the back of their planning meetings and I would just plan myself for my grade level, and I would just hear the types of questions that they were asking. I would hear the planning that they were doing and how they would problem solve in advance and be proactive about what they need to think about and prepare their students for, that will gear them up for ultimate success on their task. And I always felt that it was never about a test. It was never about how do we get them to score higher on the test. It was always about how do we build them up as little humans to just get something really great out of this next unit, to get really something amazing and meaningful out of the discussion we have as a class. Or if it was just about classroom management and practice, how do we create a practice and a system in our classroom that they will really want to participate in and build community? Because that's the point, not managing students. That's not the whole point. The point is that we build these skills. So that's where this sort of took me in my reflections of being generous. It's what we do for kids and the context we create around kids to give them opportunities to be generous. They're with you more than anyone else this year. So you have multiple opportunities to give them a moment to self-celebrate. The last thing I want to talk about is something that I have said in the past, way back when, and I hear often when I'm in classrooms. When a teacher is frustrated, they want to make that known to their students. One of the go-tos is often explaining to kids how much you have put into the classroom, how much you personally spent out of your bank account, and you want to let that be known. You're like, I didn't have to do this. I spent my hard-earned money on you. If we take a mental walk to communities of high need into classrooms where many teachers and leaders aren't equipped to support students, especially students that have been and are currently attempting to self-manage, by the way, stress, trauma, and get an education, we will sort of see a trend. We often hear teachers and leaders actually manifesting more of the scarcity mindset in their students and not even realizing it. If the only time we mention the extra stuff that we got and bought for our classroom out of our own money, when we're emotionally unconstant, we are frustrated, we are PO'd, if you know what that means. So we actually are just adding more stress to the environment that we hope to be stress-free. So if you think about it, you may only be mentioning it to your students, how much money you spent, because you actually want them to fear that it can all be taken away in an instance if they don't act right. But think about what that might do to a child who already has fluctuating and inconsistent basic living needs outside of school. Would their behavior really change after they shifted their teacher into the boat with the rest of the adults that can't be trusted to be consistent and to support them? I've been there. Trust me. I stumbled on the science of learning and development, and that's the only thing that really shifted my mindset to think more deeply about the experiences that my students were bringing along with them every day. I had a choice. I could either be a support to the great opportunity that they have to grow beyond their circumstances, or I can contribute to the vulnerability that they were dealt with in their life and they continue to be dealt. If we are in the classroom to build relationships and trust so that our students can then access academic content, we just have to do better at making sure that we mention what we purchase for our students in moments of joy. Show them generosity within the context of joy. Imagine the experience a child would have if they heard their teacher say things like, I got this for our class because I thought it would be really incredible to experience this together and learn from it. Or I thought it would be nice for our class community. So I invested money into getting this for us because I believe in us. Imagine how much different that would feel for a student and what that will be modeling. So I also want to say hats off to teachers in foundational years where they are teaching generosity and sharing for the first time, really, when you're really, really young. And, as kids get older, we're kind of reinforcing the skills. But hats off to those in early childhood that really start taking a crack at that at the very beginning. So I want us to just think about how do we create a classroom culture that continuously prioritizes sharing and also scaffolds up to that so students build that comfortability with each other before they're asked to share your thoughts, share your supplies, Because realize, you can't have a Socratic seminar with students that don't even like talking to each other, let alone sharing their materials without fighting. So there are levels to this. Ultimately, we want our students to get out of rows and get into circles, because that is what real life looks like. We're excited to go on this journey with you guys and how you can sort of build this into your practice every year. I promise you, the richness that comes from prioritizing relationships in this way in your classroom, it makes all the difference in the world in terms of your experience, feeling the joy of teaching. I would urge you to think about what you do on a daily basis as, is it something that contributes to your class environment, your school environment of being calm, safe, and predictable for your students? Create that consistency in their lives on a daily basis. Consider how you promote being generous. Thanks for listening, guys. That is a wrap for this Educator Edition episode. Don't forget to check out our Questions to Connections worksheet for this episode and other past episodes at revolvelearning.com. We also have our Path to Meaningful Connections resource, which is our signature resource. Go ahead and check that out if you're just getting started in building relationships with your students. It's a great way to just sort of walk that path to be able to have these deeper conversations about legacy and generous. So we'll catch you on the next one.